Since we began this series with the question, where did we come from? It may only be fitting that we end the series with the question, where are we headed? Humanity is evolving. With all that we have talked about in terms of interactions with ETs, awareness of spirit guides, where does all of that take us? What are we becoming as a species? Well, according to Bashar, the future holds a lot of interesting experiences, a lot of promise for what it is our potential is all about. With the idea of the hybrid civilizations that Bashar has mentioned, one thing stands out. In our future, the possibility of meeting not only extraterrestrials from different civilizations, but the actual offspring of some of the hybridization program and agendas that have occurred in the alien abductions. Because many of the abductees have reported being handed hybrid babies that are a cross between Earth humans and the Greys. And they are expected to get used to them, to love them, to teach them what it is like to live on Earth. So this sort of speaks to the idea that someday open contact might not only be contact with other extraterrestrials from other civilizations, but with our own hybrid children who may eventually come to live among us. And in the course of time, perhaps blend with us, helping Earth to evolve and humanity to evolve into what Bashar calls the sixth hybrid race. Now, what does this mean? Many people may balk at this idea, but really, what Bashar has explained is that this is not an unusual mechanism for the evolution of a species. That there are actually species in the universe who go around and actually use genetic material to upgrade a civilization. They blend them with others, and as we do know, diversification and the blending of genetic material is one way to make a species much, much stronger. So the idea is that this is one mechanism that exists in the universe for evolving a species. The idea of extracting DNA and blending it with the DNA of another species that is compatible with them. Again, as we said before, the idea that many scientists have just missed was the concept of saying, well, why are all these aliens that people have talked about so human looking? Well, again, they may not be truly alien, or they may be related to us genetically, because if we can actually have beings that are created from the DNA of an Earth human and a Grey, then that should speak to the idea that we're not that different, that we are genetically compatible to some degree, which means we are related to one another. And this is the history that we have talked about with regard to the Greys coming to the Earth. But all of this in many ways helps accelerate us, because many abductees also talk about once they are exposed to the Greys, once they are on board their ships, once they go through these abduction experiences, they come back not only changed in terms of their outlook on life, but changed in terms of their abilities. Many abductees talk about having more telepathy in their lives, more psychic abilities in their lives. And I believe that this is the result of exposure to a different frequency of reality. That when we are exposed to these different vibrations, it opens something up with us, and it may actually unlock some of the markers in our DNA that we talked about that were put there by the Anunnaki long time ago. So we may be really about to experience a new renaissance of what it means to be human. And in fact, Bashar has even commented on the idea that we may not actually be fully human yet, that we may be becoming more human. And the idea of the Greys blending with us, the hybrids blending with us, the idea that we may be already the product of many other extraterrestrial sources as hybridized Homo sapiens, gives us a broad potential to express ourselves in many different ways in the future. Now, one of the things that Bashar has talked about is the idea that we are at what he calls a splitting prism. And what this means to him is going back to the idea of parallel realities. There are an infinite number of parallel versions of Earth that coexist with our version, and that we are actually constantly shifting from one reality to another, one version of Earth to another. And as we change our belief systems, we navigate through these different versions of Earth to experience something more and more and more like the vibration and the version of Earth that we prefer. And this goes in a positive and a negative direction. Those that choose to make negative choices will experience Earths that are more negatively reflective. Those that opt for positive choices will experience versions of Earth that are more positively oriented. Eventually, he said, the splitting prism will be such that we will not necessarily interact with anyone whose vibration is completely incompatible with ours. That people will disappear from that reality one way or another, and ultimately we will only be left with interacting with people that are at least to some degree on a similar wavelength that we are on. Right now, he has said, you can still see each other, you can still observe choices being made that are vibrationally incompatible with what you prefer, but this is to give you the option to choose ultimately what it is that you do prefer as a path, what it is you are going to explore. But eventually this splitting prism, like train tracks leaving a station, will get wider and wider and wider and farther apart, and it'll be more challenging to go from one train to another eventually. As Bashar has explained in his own civilization, in their evolution, they have become so used to the idea of a positive reality that it would actually be a struggle for them to choose something the opposite, that negative energy for them. It would actually be very challenging for them to do so because there's so much momentum in their collective society, which is telepathically bonded, for choosing a positive experience. So just as we have gotten used to the idea of negative experiences, in flipping our evolution and in progressing into the future, it may be that as we learn to choose more positive belief systems, we may also be imbued with this momentum, this inertia of being eventually incapable of going backwards, incapable of choosing negativity, incapable of buying into fear-based beliefs. And I think that will say a lot towards where humanity is evolving. Because the idea is that once you have a large collective that is really focused in a certain vibrational direction, then it's going to be much easier for everyone else to kind of join if they wish to. It still gives them the opportunity to choose. We still have the free will to do that. But it makes it easier, and that's why when we use things like Bashar's formula, when we apply it to our life, when we become a living example of the kind of positive choices that other people can make by seeing the joy that it gives to us, we are helping them broaden their ability to choose a different kind of reality. We cannot force them to choose it, and we shouldn't. It is none of our business what they choose to do with this information that Bashar delivers. He knows it's none of his business. He has to leave it up to everyone to have the free will to choose what works for them, because we don't know everyone else's path. We don't know what their soul has chosen to go through. Eventually, maybe someone 10 years down the road will remember, oh yeah, I remember he said this, or I remember seeing that person living a life of joy, and I wondered what it is that allows them to do that. And maybe they will connect to it then. But everyone has to remember that we are eternal, infinite spirits. There's no hurry. There's no rush. We have all the time in existence. So what we don't learn today, we will learn tomorrow or 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years from now, because we will always have challenges. We will always be learning. We will always be growing, because it never began, and so it will never, ever end.